Good evening and welcome to all of our live attendees. We appreciate you tuning in tonight for our webinar, Mapping Your Genealogy Journey, to learn more about Boston University's Genealogy Studies program. My name is Sarah and I will be moderating tonight's session, joined by our host and program director, Melissa Johnson, certified genealogist. We have an engaging session planned for you this evening as we take a deeper dive into how DNA testing and autosomal DNA are used to trace ancestry and genetic genealogy concepts and ethics as presented in BU's two courses. We welcome you to ask questions at the end of the presentation during the questions and answer session. And this webinar is being recorded and a link will be sent to your email tomorrow afternoon for your reference and to share with your networks. All right, so here's our agenda for tonight's session. So during the presentation, we will be discussing the two courses offered at BU, Genealogical Principles and the Certificate in Genealogical Research, the DNA and ethnicity components in each course, forensic genealogy, and then the registration process. I would now like to introduce the Genealogy Program Director, Melissa Johnson. In addition to her newest role as program director, Melissa has 3 years of experience on the teaching staff and 14 years of experience as a practicing genealogist, a national lecturer, educator, and author. And much of her work has been distributed in well-known genealogy journals, magazines, and other publications. And I'll turn it over to you. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone who has taken the time to be here tonight. Before we dive into some of the programs, I did want to tell you a little bit about myself. As mentioned, I am the program director, but I wanted to give you sort of a glimpse into my journey as a genealogist, which actually started when I was very young. My grandfather, who you see in the bottom right, he became interested in genealogy when I was a young kid. He used to babysit me. His mother died when he was very young, and he didn't really know a whole lot about her or her family. His father remarried and they moved to another area. So he was interested in learning about his mom's family. And this was in the early 90s. So we didn't have all the tools we have available to us today. We didn't have Ancestry and Family Search and the internet. So he was mostly writing to churches and archives and, going here and there to try to pick up a record or two. But he had a big family tree that he was working on, and I became really interested in it. He passed away when I was 11 years old, and my dad gave me his folder of documents, which was just one kind of small folder, and I loved picking up on what he did for, a couple of years, and that's really what sort of drove my interest in genealogy. Fast forward a couple of years, I was in college and I started visiting archives and libraries, especially when I did my study abroad in England. I started researching my family that was from there, which was that same grandfather's line, my Johnson line. And then I was on a roll. I had visited, repositories in a couple different countries. And soon after, I started joining organizations and becoming more involved in genealogy as a professional field. And then fast forward again a couple years later, and I found some really great discoveries on my other grandfather's side, my maternal grandfather, who you see up there in the top right corner with me, and that is his family in the bottom left over there. And we're going to talk about them again in a couple of minutes when we talk a little bit about what you can do with what you learn in the BU course and what I've been able to accomplish over the years by advancing my genealogical education. So we're going to take a look at some of the programs that the Boston University Genealogy Studies curriculum has to offer. We have two programs, one Genealogical Principles, which is a shorter 7-week program, and the second is a Certificate in Genealogical Research, which is a longer 15-week program that is more rigorous. We do have a quiz on our website, and I would encourage anyone who is looking at these programs or maybe isn't sure which one is best for them to really take the quiz, and even to feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, because we really do want to get you in the program that is right for you based on your experience and your goals. So genealogical principles is, again, a shorter program, and it's typically for people who are enthusiasts but not having 25 years of experience, with genealogy. Maybe you are a newer genealogist, you have done very limited research in archives and repositories, but you're looking to do that in the future. And most of your research has been, online, or you've done a little bit of DNA testing. So those are, some of the people that are a great fit for genealogical principles. For the certificate program, many people take the principles program, and then we usually recommend that you have maybe a semester or two off and gain some real experience kind of applying what you've learned in principles to visit repositories and work on some of your own research, maybe help a friend or a neighbor, and then go into the certificate program. We've found that that's sort of the best path for the most success. If you're starting at that, level for principles where you're an enthusiast and you really want to learn more, but you haven't done a lot of on-site research yet. However, many of you who are here may have been doing genealogy for a long time, and you may have lots of experience on site at repositories, or really digging into records a little bit more deeply than what's online. And those students may be perfect for the genealogical research certificate program, which again is 15 weeks, and that is broken out into 4 different modules, which we're going to talk about. To cover a little bit more about the principles program, we really want to start all of our students with a solid foundation of genealogical concepts and terminology, and just sort of, best practices for how to create good research habits. So once those are explained, we have a lot of activities and assignments that help you improve your research skills. They really challenge you and sort of make you take a step back and start doing things the right way. Looking at the resources that are right for you rather than what is just available online in a search engine, making sure that you're taking good steps to document what you've done step by step along the way. So you're really becoming a structured and more organized genealogist, and you're gaining knowledge on different types of resources. You're looking at not just the resources, what can I search for and where do I find it, but also some of the strategy and methodology behind it. We also are going to introduce the genealogical proof standard, which is sort of a 5-component process for making sure that your research is sound and that you're making accurate conclusions. And then we're going to teach you as well, some techniques that are good for researching modern day people. That's a big topic now that DNA has come into play. So we're going to talk about, how to research public records for modern days, and then also modern day people, and then also going back to make sure you're really establishing reliable links between parents and children, so that when you're tracing your tree, you don't make a misstep along the way and then wind up tracing a family back to the 1700s that's not actually yours. And the Genealogical Principles program also introduces DNA and ethnicity estimates, or what is known as sometimes biogeographical estimates, to students. So we really want to give you a good foundation in all of these topics so that you can, build upon them in future curriculums such as the certificate program. So the certificate program, again, is 15 weeks, and it takes place over 4 different modules. So the first module focuses on genealogical methods. There are a lot of different pieces to learn, and this picks up on some of what has been taught in principles, really teaching good research habits, making sure you're tracking your trail as you go, and giving you some real life good practice into assignments that really test you and make you become a better researcher. Our next module focuses on evidence evaluation and documentation. So really understanding the concepts of what is a genealogical source. That's a document, a record, something you can look at. And, how is that different from the information that is included on that source? And how is that different from evidence as that information is analyzed and applies to a question? And how do you actually prove a conclusion in genealogy reliably? The forensic genealogy module touches on aspects of forensic genealogy, which is defined as genealogy as it pertains to the law. So that also includes genetic genealogy. Everything that everyone is doing now with consumer DNA testing is lumped into our forensic genealogy module. So forensic genealogy includes genetic genealogy as well as other pieces of the puzzle as well. And then our last module focuses on genealogy as a profession. So really teaching you how to create quality work products if you want to become a professional genealogist. And even if you don't want to become a professional genealogist, these are great work products to know how to create a research report to yourself, how to really analyze your conclusions and put your analysis in writing. And this is important even for doing your own family research, making sure that your written piece is professional and really reflects your best work and shows that your conclusions and the research that you've done is accurate and reliable. Again, genealogical principles, we just want to make sure that you are understanding kind of the difference between the two. For genetic genealogy, what it's going to cover is the basics. So you're going to learn about the different types of testing companies and what kind of tests they offer, what types of different tools they offer. Each company has different features and one may be better than another for what you're trying to accomplish by DNA testing. If you're just trying to get your DNA out there and fish in the pond of DNA matches, that's great, and you may want to use a couple companies, but as you get more involved, you may want to introduce other types of DNA testing like mitochondrial DNA and Y-DNA. We're also going to talk about ethnicity results and how those are constantly changing, how the algorithms are changing, and how to really use those and make sure you're not misusing them. There's also a large section in all of our programs on ethics. So genetic genealogy ethics are really important for people's privacy concerns. There's a lot of people out there who take DNA tests who don't necessarily understand the consequences of them. We want to make sure that if you're working with someone who falls in that category, that you are doing so carefully and ethically, and then also that you are not, violating anyone else's privacy or, and that you're generally thinking about, what is the ethical thing to do? How is this appropriately handled? So we're going to cover all of those topics in principles. The certificate program, we're going to run through some of the key elements of the 4 different modules. So in genealogical methods, as I mentioned, we really want to give you a good foundation, develop good research habits, but we're also going to change your mindset and how you're thinking. So you're going to develop more logical and critical thinking skills, and you're going to become a better genealogist because you're going to start thinking about things in a different way. Many of our students say that they came into the program sort of interested in collecting names and dates and, connecting to the next generation, and they come out wanting to learn more about the ancestors that they already knew they had. So they're thinking more about their lives, really proving the connections between those generations and wanting to know more solid information about their ancestors. We're also going to look at the research cycle. So this is really important in terms of, first setting out and figuring out what your research problem is, then figuring out a plan for it, then executing that plan and documenting what you've done in the execution of that plan, and then analyzing it and writing it. So this all plays into later modules, like when we talk about report writing. Genealogical methods also talks about DNA because we really want to introduce DNA as something that coincides with documentary evidence. So you can't have just DNA being what you focus on, there's always documentary evidence that goes along with it. Whether you're doing unknown parentage cases, whether you're working for a civil or a criminal court, it's not just the DNA, it's the documentary evidence, and you need to make sure you're using both correctly and that you're using them both together, whether you're, tracing ancestry or doing more recent work. And then we're going to set the foundations here for learning to solve problems, which is something you're going to build upon in modules 2 and then in module 3 as well with some forensic genealogy problems. Our forensic genealogy module focuses on a lot, and a lot of that includes DNA. So when we talk about unknown parentage, that's finding recent unknown parentage in terms of birth parents or children who don't know who their parents are for some reason or the other. They don't know who one parent is. They don't know who both is. Some children were adopted, some were foundlings, and some, find late in life that they, did not have the parents they expected to have, and they don't really know why. So autosomal DNA can help solve these mysteries and identify birth families, and that's a lot of what this module focuses on. We have a great assignment there where students are actually solving a real life unknown parentage case, and you'll work with the actual DNA and the documentary evidence to see how it all flows together to identify someone's father. Again, we're always going to talk about the ethics. So looking at different scenarios, our discussion boards that are a big part of the BU curriculum are a great place where you can interact with your other fellow students and your instructors on different types of ethical considerations and how to handle different situations. And these are really interesting elements because there's no right or wrong answer in most cases, and it's interesting to see, different perspectives and where different people are coming from. Another big part of forensic genealogy is taking a look at missing heirs. So remember I said forensic genealogy pertains to the law. So that involves doing research for attorneys who are working on estate cases, trying to find heirs of someone who has recently been deceased. In a lot of cases, these are, attorneys, oil and mineral companies. They could be banks, they could be trusts, they could be, a whole bunch of different types of entities that would need your services as a genealogist to do this. And of course, anything that goes along with DNA or heir tracing involves looking at the living. So tracing the living in public records, what kinds of databases are available, what are the best strategies to do that. And this module does focus primarily on autosomal DNA in terms of the assignments, but we do teach you how to use a chromosome browser, how to look at shared match lists to solve problems, and how to develop targeted testing plans and who needs to be tested and what kind of tests and where do they need to be tested. And taking a look at all of that to work on forensic genealogy problems. So a lot of the autosomal DNA that we discuss is very complicated. We do run through all of the key elements of, how do you use these websites, what types of information do you need to glean from test results in order to draw accurate conclusions. Looking at chromosome browsers is part of it. Looking at some of the third-party DNA tools that are currently available are also part of it. And our curriculum changes quite a bit as current events are changing. So as many of you who are DNA testers know, there are a lot of companies that, sometimes there's a glitch with a database, or there's a certain third-party tool that no longer works with a certain database, or something has changed to terms of service. So we do modify and constantly change our curriculum to respond to what is going on in terms of external factors in the genealogy and DNA world. So again, just a quick overview in terms of what is covered for DNA testing and genetic genealogy in each of the programs. Principles is going to introduce Y chromosome testing and mitochondrial DNA testing, as well as the different testing companies and tools and strategies for using autosomal DNA. The certificate program is going to challenge you a little bit more with looking at assignments focused on figuring out someone's parentage when they don't know using DNA test results. And is also going to take a look at how to research the living. So focusing on using public records, because that is really key in using DNA testing, is that you're working with people who are currently living, and you're generally going back in time to then go forward in time to solve a problem. And we also are going to discuss different types of careers in genetic genealogy, as well as the ethics surrounding them. So what can you do when you come out of one of these programs, particularly the certificate program, with your new knowledge on DNA testing? Many of our graduates are working, practicing professional genealogists who work on a variety of cases. Resolving adoption cases is very big right now, and even unknown parentage that doesn't fall under the realm of adoption. A lot of our graduates focus on this type of work and take clients, from various sources that are people who need help with their DNA test results. Sometimes our researchers, more advanced graduates of the certificate program, they work on cases that are a little bit farther back. So it's similar to solving an adoption or unknown parentage case, only the unknown parentage is 3, 4, 5 generations back. So it's really more like breaking through a brick wall that you've probably done a lot of research on in the past, or your client has, but you need some more help. And now DNA is available. So figuring out how that can help you and really doing some of that advanced analysis to figure that out. Also, I mentioned a lot of our researchers work with courts and general, other entities within the legal profession or banking and property world on different types of cases, either civil or criminal. So I mentioned earlier when I was talking about my grandfathers that I found something really interesting on my maternal grandfather's side. And this was shortly after I completed the BU program back in 2011. I was, focusing on really looking back at the research I had done before and making sure that my conclusions were accurate with all of these new skills that I had. And one of the things that I went to look at was my grandfather's family. And as I started digging into more records and looking at original records instead of just what was available to me online, I found something that was interesting about my grandfather. So as I was looking at his original baptismal record, which I had never sought out before because I had his birth certificate and I thought that was good enough, I found that his baptismal record had his father's name crossed out, and in the margin it noted illegitimate. And so this was really interesting to me because I had always sort of suspected that something was not quite right with the family lore. The family lore was always that his father left for Poland when his mother was pregnant with him and never returned. So there were a couple things with that story that didn't really make sense. The family had just moved from Philadelphia to Scranton the year before my grandfather was born, only I was never finding his father, or who we believed was his father, Frank, in Scranton records. I found his mother listed alone, which was not typical for a married woman at that time. So looking into this a little more, I was able to find some court records saying that Frank had abandoned Helen, my grandpa's mother, 1 whole year before my grandfather was born. So as we know, that math doesn't really make sense. So taking a look at some more details about my grandfather's family, I was able to solve a real family mystery. So using DNA, I started DNA testing my mom and her siblings. My grandfather was deceased at this point, and in testing them, I was able to figure out that my mom was actually a half cousin to some of my grandfather's older siblings because they were half siblings to my grandfather. He had a different dad. So looking at what I learned, over the past couple of years, I had put together a DNA testing plan, a targeted testing plan to test my mom and her siblings and see what matches there were. So my mom initially had a match who is the box in green that you see all the way to the far left, who was a second cousin or approximately second cousin match to my mom and her siblings, and who was from a Vilgos family that I had no documentary connection to. And so I started target testing more people in that family. And I was eventually able to zero in on my grandfather's biological father, who no one ever knew was not Frank Jimkowski, the man that was married to his mother and who eventually left his mother. So that was really interesting, something interesting for my family to figure out that probably no one would have ever figured out if I hadn't gotten some advanced genealogical education and really started digging into more records and also started using DNA testing, which is now a genealogical source, just like everything else, like a will, like a deed, like a census record. As I mentioned, some of these are also more complex problems. Taking a look a couple years later at my great-great-great-grandfather, William Murphy, I really wanted to identify who his parents were. He was an immigrant to the United States from England, and I thought I had an idea that he was connected to another man in Newark, New Jersey named Henry Murphy, who might have been his brother, but I wasn't really sure. I had a lot of documentary evidence that suggested a strong connection. Both men were shoemakers. Both men lived in Newark. They immigrated around the same time. They were Murphys from England, which is not too common. Most Murphys are from Ireland. And they were both Methodists. So they had a lot of similarities. And there were a lot of names for their children and grandchildren that were similar. It seemed like there were some naming patterns there. But I didn't really have enough documentary evidence to really solidify that. So along came DNA testing. And so if you look at the orange box on the very left, those descendants in green are William's descendants that I had DNA tested. And then I started having Henry's descendants DNA tested, and other siblings of Henry who either stayed in England or weren't in the general area, I had their descendants tested. And then I was able to come up with a giant cluster of DNA matches. My Williams descendants matched Henry's and matched James's and matched Joanna's. So that really helped, along with, again, lots of documentary evidence too. And the documentary evidence and the DNA evidence together form a body of evidence that really helped me prove that my William Murphy was the son of James Murphy and his wife Susanna. And in doing this, I was able to find that I have a small, minuscule amount of French ancestry, which I'm very proud of because I never knew I had that before. So that was an interesting find based on some of my knowledge that I gained from BU and some of the confidence that I had to, put something together that was new and different at the time. Anyway, so DNA really helped to add to my body of evidence.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Melissa, for the wealth of information presented and a glimpse into your own research. So for those who are interested in learning more about the registration process for our programs, here is a typical enrollment schedule that you might see. This program is held 3 times a year, so that's every January, every May, and every September. And the fall 2020 session enrollment deadline is quickly approaching. It's on August 14th, and the class begins on September 8th. For this particular session, we'll also be holding a fall 2 session, which is exclusively just for genealogical principles, which will run November 3rd through December 21st. And the tuition is listed here on the slide. So for principals, it comes in at $995, and the certificate is $2,695. And the website is listed here for more information that you can find on that website. We do have a few different payment options as well that students can take advantage of. We offer monthly payment plans up to 4 months. We also have employer-funded payments, and you can also be approved for the Sallie Mae Smart Loan. And there is also military benefits with GI Bill involved as well. If you have any questions about the registration process, please feel free just to contact a member of our enrollment team. We have Amber with us behind the scenes tonight answering questions in the chat for you as well. And you can certainly email us at the email listed here. The phone number 617-502-8822, or you can connect with us via live chat on our program website. All right, that now brings us to our questions and answer session. So we'll take about the next half an hour or so to answer questions from the audience for Melissa. So please just use your questions box on the right-hand side of your screen to ask questions. And I know we've had a few coming in throughout the webinar, so we'll dive right in and get started here. All right, let's see. Melissa, for you, your first question here, can you please explain how the online participation works in this course?
Sure. So all of the BU courses are done completely online. You don't need to come to classes. You don't need to come to Boston. Our classes are based in what we call Online Campus, which is an online platform that includes basically a way to interact with your fellow students and your instructors. So that includes, you're having your actual course material in there, as well as your assignments that are assigned to you, and references to extra reading material that are books that we recommend and that we require in some cases. And in that online campus, there are discussion boards. That's where you submit your assignments. It's where you have an internal messaging system to chat with your fellow students and also with your instructors to ask any questions. And generally it's where everything happens. We do have normally we have one assignment that does require you to leave your home and visit a repository. However, we have made modifications for that to keep everyone safe and healthy during this COVID-19 sort of new world everyone is living in. So as long as that is still an issue, the program will continue to be amended to have an alternate assignment for what is usually an assignment where you go to a repository and look at a manuscript collection. So everything is online. There's a lot of reading material, and then you complete assessments and assignments, quizzes, and discussion boards to participate, but it's all done online. We also do have some live classroom sessions, which is basically sort of like what you're on now. You have the ability to view, an instructor's material. It may be a presentation, it may be a discussion, and to interact and ask questions. It's a little different than this platform because the students, can be on video with their fellow students and can, chime in verbally or use the chat to ask questions.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you for answering the question about visiting the repositories, as that was somebody's question right after this one. So for you next here, Melissa, do the courses address relatives that live in Europe, specifically maybe Russia, sorry?
So we have our assignments throughout the course, and they are all very diverse. So we like to give you a good kind of flavor for all different types of research. So, we do have in Module 1 an assignment that does work on a Russian family. We give, lots of examples and assignments on different types of families. So there's, information on families from Pennsylvania, in the 1950s, from colonial families to, African American families in the South. So we don't teach any type of, specific research, like how to do Slovak research or how do you research your, German ancestors from this region. So we teach, more generally the skills that are needed and, the mindset, the methodology, taking a look at the strategies. But we do use a lot of different examples from, ethnic and geographic and different time periods.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And the next question, this person asks, would these classes help us get to that point of certified genealogist? And maybe you can just give a high-level overview of the steps one would have to take to be certified.
Sure, that's a great question. So a lot of our graduates do become certified genealogists. This course is definitely, one of a couple steps to take to prepare you for that. A kind of a natural flow for our students is typically they, complete our program. They may go into another program that's sort of a peer study group. There are a couple of those that, help advance people towards certification. They're very different than BU, not as comprehensive, and they're focused differently. They're kind of a peer support group focused on different elements like business planning and writing and things like that. But yes, so our program is great preparation for certification. I know I can speak personally that it's, one of the things for me that definitely absolutely helped really prepare me for becoming certified with BCG.
Wonderful, thank you. And Melissa, what is the grading like for the certificate course?
So the grading for the certificate course, each module has a certain weight to it based on the length of the module. Some of the modules are 5 weeks or 4 weeks, so the weight is based on, the overall time spent there. And the grading is a combination of different things. So you do earn points for discussion board participation. Quizzes, there are some quizzes that are, if there's 10 questions, each one is worth a certain amount of points. And then there are papers that you submit in response to other assignments that are more of, it's not a quiz or a test, it's a paper that you're writing. And those papers, our program is very similar to humanities style, higher education. So, it's not like a math exam where there's a right or wrong answer. So you're graded sort of on the sum of the whole. You're not dinged for, missing a certain piece or a section. You're graded on sort of the sum of the paper like you would be in any kind of humanities style course. But the great part about our faculty is what we really pride ourselves on a lot is providing great feedback. So when you write a paper, you're not just going to get a grade, you're getting lots of really constructive feedback that tells you, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? Where can I improve? So that's where we really shine as a program is with our feedback. So I hope that answers your question on grading. If not, feel free to follow up.
That was great, thank you. And next question for you, do you see trends in the amount of work for genealogists and the kind of work? You had mentioned working, currently with helping adoptees as an example.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the genealogy field, for professionals who are looking to take on that, kind of work or any kind of work has really been booming. Genealogy is a top hobby for people in the in the US and even in other countries. And, they are people who tend to, they do a little bit on ancestry, but they don't have enough, as much of an interest as everyone who's sitting here tonight. And, they get stuck. So they either get stuck with, an ancestor in 1780 in New Jersey, or they get stuck with, oh, well, my DNA is showing something that's not right. I need help with that. Or an adoptee wants to take a DNA test but doesn't understand how to use the results and hires a genealogist to help them with it. So all of these things are really contributing to the genealogy field. There's a lot of increased interest in genealogy because of consumer DNA testing and because of all these websites like Ancestry and Family Search that are so readily available and heavily marketed. So absolutely, there's a lot of growth in the field right now and a lot of opportunities for professionals.
Great, thank you. And this is a format question for the course. Are classes done in the Zoom form or more of a webinar form when you meet live?
So when you are live, we do use Zoom within our online campus. So our online campus supports Zoom. So if there is a live classroom, that's what it's done through.
All right, thank you. And there's a few questions about just places where there will be actual research done, so I'll just sort of aggregate that together. This person's asking, will there be research done from ancestors from Ireland? I think another person mentioned delving into Spanish records. Can you touch upon that a little bit?
Sure. So, as I mentioned before, we don't have, a specific focus that we're going to teach you how to use, German records or, something like that. There are specialty books and, kind of other online educational opportunities for that. But we teach, the general methodology that you can use in a variety of, geographic or ethnic, types of research. And, we do point you to learning about resources. So, what you learn in our class, you will be able to know where to go to look for those Irish resources or German resources, because we're going to teach you, how to use catalogs properly, how to really dive into knowing what records are out there that are not online. So we're going to teach you the tools you need to do that research. And, people leaving our program can, if they have no experience in Irish research, they can, make their way through enough because they know what to look for, even though they don't yet know exactly what's there.
Awesome, thank you very much. And this question for you, Melissa, how long is each weekly course session, and are the courses held once a week?
So our courses are sort of self-paced. So, we recommend that students spend, anywhere from, some students spend as little as 15 hours a week, some spend, 25 or 30 hours a week, but there are due dates for the assignments, but because the course material is information that you read from our curriculum, information that you're obtaining by reading books, and then participating in the discussion board. So we have deadlines for those things. Usually there's an assignment a week that's due, but aside from the live classrooms, there isn't a certain time that you have to show up for class. So if you like to do your reading at 6 a.m. before your kids are awake, you can do it then. If you're a night owl, you can do it then. So it's really kind of based on your schedule. It's self-paced in a way.
Great, thank you. And sort of touching upon that as well, a lot of people are asking about the weekly time commitment for each course. And normally I would say around 20 hours per week as a generalization, but I don't know, Melissa, if you have any other recommendations or insight into that, given the homework and the assignments.
Sure. So yeah, 20 hours is about average. There are students who spend less, there are students who spend more. It kind of depends on how motivated you are, to get a good grade. If you, are working, you may have to spend a little bit, less time, or, do your reading, assignments on the weekends or something like that. But, generally people spend about 20 hours a week, and it does, vary a little bit on the experience you have coming in. So, some of our students may have books already that are the books that we are, requiring and asking you to read parts of, and maybe you've already read that chapter, so you just need to skim it. So that may save you some time, but it really kind of depends on your experience coming in and your motivation as well.
Great, thank you very much. And someone is asking here if the syllabus will be posted online for the course.
Yeah, so our syllabus is if you're used to what a kind of a genealogy syllabus is like for a major conference, our syllabus really is kind of, more like a college syllabus. It's got, what you're expected to read and when you're expected to read it, what the assignments are, what deadlines are, due dates, things like that. But so that is provided to students who register. So it's not something that we put on our website, although a lot of the information is on our website. You can see the books that are required and the reading assignments. You can see the modules and their kind of generally what they cover. So, a lot of that information is online, but the syllabus is kind of more specific information that students need once they are enrolled in the course.
Great, thank you. This is an interesting question here. Maybe you can shed some insight here. This person says, I'm interested in understanding the challenges of getting others tested for DNA. How did you best go about this yourself?
That's a great question. So the best advice I offer people I can offer people when they ask that is, I generally will write people a letter and explain to them what I'm doing and why I need their DNA. So for the William Murphy case that I, mentioned to you earlier, I included that chart that I showed you in my, letter to them. I explained to them I'm working on this project, trying to identify my ancestor's father. I need testing candidates from his potential brother's, descendants, and you are one of them. I offer to pay for their test. I do tell them that they can retain access to their results. I don't really need, to be the one that accesses their results, although if they can add me as a guest, that would be great. And that I basically just want to see how they show up in my match list. And other than that, everything is under their control. So that's generally the strategy that sort of works best for me.
That's great, thank you. Next question for you. Do you need a subscription to Ancestry or any other websites to complete this course?
We provide a subscription to Ancestry Library to students that they can use throughout the semester. Other than that, there's nothing specific that's needed other than Ancestry Library, which is what we give you.
All right, thank you. All right, we have a lot of questions here and just about 10 or so minutes left, so we'll try to get to as many as we can in the box here. I know we have quite a few people submitting as we go. Let's see, so the next question for you, are there projects dealing with prison and military records and patents and legal cases as well as we get going using a variety of primary sources besides those that appear online? I know that was sort of a mouthful. I apologize if you need me to repeat that.
That's okay. So we do have a lot of assignments and reading materials that focus on specific record groups. So military is definitely one of them. We talk a lot about land records generally, all different kinds of land records like patents and surveys and deeds and mortgages. So yeah, we do touch on a lot of different record groups so that students come out with a good foundation of what's generally available, in the US and elsewhere.
Great, thank you. All right, are there any resources beyond the career module for students after they complete the course to assist in starting their career as a professional genealogist?
So we do have at the end of the course some resources that will help you kind of figure out what educational opportunities are good for next steps, what kinds of organizations you may want to join, what kinds of peer support groups and study groups are out there. The Boston University program also has a mailing list for graduates as well, and that's a great resource. By now there's 11, almost 12 years worth of graduates on there. So it's a pretty large, alumni network. That's a great resource for networking and professional opportunities.
Great, thank you. And is sort of going off of that as well, are there certain organizations that you might recommend that one join prior to taking classes or going beyond novice level?
That really kind of depends on your focus. So, I mean, I always recommend that people join their local genealogical society, whatever is available in their county or the next county over, or even their state genealogical society. And then also to look at, ethnic and religious organizations. If you are researching, Italians, joining the Italian Genealogical Society. Also taking a look at what else might appeal to you. So you can learn a lot from these organizations. They have great newsletters and websites and member-only areas and resources. So that's a great place to start, if you're first jumping into becoming a more serious genealogist, whether professional or not.
All right, thank you. I'm just going through a few other questions here. This person says, I've been doing research since I was 14 and I'm soon to be 62, and I've gone to churches, cemeteries, and used letters to family members. I have used many of the sites online to do research. Was wondering if it would be worth taking both programs.
It really kind of depends. I would say, the students that have the most success in the certificate program are students that have done a lot of, or not even a lot of, but a decent amount of research outside of online sources, like in your local courthouse, in your archives, your state archive, your county archive, maybe at the National Archives, in different repositories. So it really kind of depends. I would encourage you to take the quiz that's online and see kind of where that puts you. And if you're still unsure, you can feel free to send me an email if you'd like.
Great. And would you be able to answer a question about how many students are usually in the program at one time for either course? If you have maybe a general ballpark estimate?
Sure. So each semester, the principals program has about 130 students, and depending on how many students we have, we break the students out into smaller groups. So you do get an experience of working with a smaller group. You're not kind of, one of 130 that's going to get lost. So most of our students actually don't really even have a good gauge of how many students are in the program overall, because they are working so closely with their group of, maybe 25 or 30 students. So that's for the principals program. The certificate program typically hovers, somewhere around, a little over 100. So it's usually a little bit less than principals, but we do the same thing there as well. We separate you into groups so that you're working with, a group of students, in your discussion boards that's smaller, and so that no one, gets lost along the way.
Great, thank you. And I know we didn't talk about textbooks in this particular webinar, but this person's asking how many textbooks are required with each course and if Blackboard is used as the format.
Yep, so Blackboard is used as the format. That's what we've been using for the last 12 years or so, at least since I took the program. So if you go to our website and look under the program overview, you can see the different books for principals and certificate. So the books are different, for each program. For the principals program, we do require 3 books: the Genealogy Standards Manual, the Guide to DNA Testing and Genetic Genealogy, and the Everything Guide to Online Genealogy. And then for the certificate program, we also require the Genealogy Standards and the Guide to DNA Testing and Genetic Genealogy, as well as 2 other books, Mastering Genealogical Documentation and the Professional Genealogy Manual.
This person is asking what type of ongoing education is available after the certificate program to become certified?
So there are a couple of programs. One is called the ProGen Study Group. It goes through the professional genealogy book, sort of chapter by chapter in a peer review sense, and has you do assignments. So it's not like the BU program in the sense that you don't have Instructors, it also is about a year long, so it's quite a bit longer, and it goes at a much slower pace. But you are working with peers on different aspects of professional genealogy, and then there are also certification discussion groups, which are run by a certified genealogist, not by the Board for Certification of Genealogists, but run privately by a genealogist. And those are a resource as well. And then also for certification, when you kind of start that clock ticking, BCG has some resources as well. They have an action group online that you get to be part of once you can kind of pull the trigger and say, I want to become certified. So there's quite a bit out there.
Great, thank you so much. And this is actually, I think, a great question that maybe a lot of people are having too, and just summarized in one. What are some of the biggest challenges that students have had, particularly with the principles course in the past, and how might someone who is new to registering for this course meet those challenges?
Sure. So I would, suggest based on, prior experience that, you really set aside enough time. I think some of the students that struggle in the course, go into it maybe thinking that this is something they can, spend, 4 or 5 hours a week on, and that's not necessarily the case, even if they are, somewhat experienced as a genealogist. You do also really need to, and this kind of goes back to probably what our parents were telling us back to 2nd grade, is that you do need to read the reading material to be able to do the assignments. So those are kind of the pieces I can offer you most. That's where I see, students struggle, is where they, didn't complete the reading and tried to complete an assignment that is contingent on completing the reading. And then, generally not, devoting enough time to the program.
Great, thank you so much. Can one work remotely as a certified genealogist, and specifically remotely from another country?
It really depends on what your specialty is. So, if your specialty is, working with DNA test results, you can probably work mostly remotely and then order records as needed. I will say it's really hard for a genealogist to work completely remotely, because you will at some point need records that are not available online. So there's lots of options though. You can use subcontractors to obtain records for you in other places. I do that all the time. I do a lot of New Jersey research, but on occasion, I have someone who moved out to California that's part of that New Jersey family, and I need to get someone there to pull a record for me. So it really depends on your specialty. If you, for example, wanted to really focus on colonial New Jersey research, but you lived in Belgium, I can say successfully that's probably not going to work for you. But it really depends where you are and what your specialty is. So there's a lot of people who, their families are from, say, New England, but they currently live in Texas. So they develop a specialty where they live, so that they have access to records.
Great, thank you so much. And people are asking if books are included in the fees or if you have to buy them separately. I can sort of take that one if you'd like. Books are not necessarily included, but we do run quite a few promotions throughout the year where books are included. So we just have to look for that in a promotional email or on the website. And you can see that in the course materials tab on the website to see the books and then the costs associated with them as well. All right, so we just have time for maybe one more question. So let's find a good one here for you, Melissa.
Sure.
Here's a good one, I think, because a lot of people have had a similar question to this, worded a little bit differently, I think. If you take the certificate program, do you get a certificate that you can then use professionally, or is there other steps that you have to take and test to obtain this certificate? So this particular certificate from BU, how is that sort of used and accredited?
Sure. So many of the students who complete the program, well, let me back up for a minute. In order to obtain the certificate, you do have to meet a certain grade threshold, and that's outlined in the syllabus. but if you maintain that grade threshold, you receive a certificate. So the proper way to, sort of emphasize that you have gone through this program is not to say you're a certified genealogist. So certification is through the Board for Certification of Genealogists, which is a different organization. But what students can say and what they, display is their certificate in genealogical research from Boston University. And you'll see that on a lot of professional genealogist websites as a credential. It's a great one to have. It gives, the public and consumers some confidence in your research abilities because you've gone through this program. So that's the proper, sort of terminology for, individuals who successfully complete the program.
Excellent answer. Thank you so much. All right, and that sort of brings us to the end of our webinar for this evening. Thank you all again for joining us and for all your very thoughtful questions. And if you have any additional questions or if we did not get to your questions, please reach out to us. We will be sending this, just as a reminder, to your email tomorrow, the recording, so you'll have all the information presented, the audio, and then the information to contact us on one of the later slides. We hope that this information presented by Melissa will help guide you on your genealogy journey and get you in the right course that's good for you. And I hope everyone has a wonderful night and stay safe.